What if I told you that the most carefree being in Middle-earth once stood face to face with the greatest craftsman of the Second Age, not in friendship, but in a meeting that would reshape the very nature of power itself? Today we're diving into one of the most overlooked connections in Tolkien's world, a story hidden between the lines of his greatest works. This is the untold story of when Tom Bombadil met Celebrimbor, and how their encounter changed the fate of the Rings of Power forever. Picture this. We're in Eregion, sometime around the year 1600 of the Second Age. Celebrimbor, grandson of Feanor himself, is deep in his forge, crafting rings of incredible power. The air hums with magic, the sound of hammers on mithril echoes through stone halls, and the greatest smith since the elder days is pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But something's wrong. Something ancient stirs in the shadows, whispering promises of knowledge, offering secrets that seem too good to refuse. That something, as we know from the Silmarillion, is Sauron in disguise as Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. He's been working alongside Celebrimbor for years, teaching him techniques that would make even the Valar take notice. But here's what most people miss. Tom Bombadil was already ancient when the first elves awakened. He's older than Sauron's corruption, older than the rings themselves, and if anyone could sense the growing shadow in Eregion, it would be him. Now you might wonder why Tom would even care. After all, he famously tells the hobbits that such troubles are not his concern. But remember what Tolkien tells us in his letters. Tom represents something fundamental about the world, something that exists outside the usual struggles for power. He's not indifferent to evil, he's immune to it. And sometimes immunity requires action. The meeting would have happened on a night when the stars seemed dimmer than usual, when even the rivers of Eregion ran quieter, as if the very land was holding its breath. Celebrimbor, exhausted from his work, steps out of his forge for air. The weight of creation sits heavy on his shoulders. He's been crafting wonders, yes, but something feels wrong. The rings are beautiful, more powerful than he ever imagined, but there's a shadow to them, a hunger that he can't quite explain. That's when he hears it, singing. Not the structured melodies of elven music, but something wilder, older, a tune that seems to come from the earth itself. Through the trees walks a figure that shouldn't exist, not here, not in this age of growing darkness. Yellow boots, bright blue jacket, impossible cheer in his face. Tom Bombadil, the master, has come to Eregion. Now here's where it gets interesting. Celebrimbor is no ordinary elf. He's seen the light of Valinor, he's worked with materials that could cut through the very fabric of reality, and his grandfather created the Silmarils themselves. But when he looks at Tom, he sees something that makes even his ancient wisdom pause. This isn't just another being of power, this is something fundamental, something that existed before the music of creation settled into its current patterns. Tom approaches the forge, not with the reverence most would show, but with curiosity. He examines Celebrimbor's work with the eye of someone who understands craft at its deepest level. The rings gleam on their workbench, beautiful beyond description, but Tom sees what others cannot. He sees the threads of corruption woven into their very essence, the subtle influence that Sauron has embedded in every stroke of the hammer, every whispered suggestion. But Tom doesn't lecture Celebrimbor about the danger. That's not his way. Instead, he does something far more effective. He shows him, with a casual gesture that makes the greatest smith of the age step back in wonder, Tom picks up one of the lesser rings. Not the 7 or the 9, and certainly not the 3, but one of the practice pieces, the experiments that led to the greater works. The ring should have no effect on Tom, just as the one ring wouldn't later affect him in the old forest. But instead of simply being immune, Tom does something remarkable. He shows Celebrimbor how the ring was meant to be. With his touch, the corruption burns away, not violently, but like morning mist dissolving in sunlight. For a moment, just a moment, Celebrimbor sees what his craft could create. Without Sauron's influence, the ring in Tom's hand becomes something entirely different. Not a tool of domination, but a thing of pure creation, a vessel for the joy and wonder that first shaped the world. It sings, literally sings, with a voice like wind through ancient trees, like water over stones that have known centuries of peace. This is what the rings of power could have been, should have been, if they had been crafted with pure intent. Celebrimbor stares in amazement, then in growing horror, as he understands what he's been doing. Every ring he's made, every masterwork he's crafted with Anatar's guidance, has been tainted from the very beginning. The corruption isn't something that can be removed later. It's woven into the fundamental structure of each piece. He's been creating tools of enslavement while believing he was crafting instruments of preservation and power. But Tom isn't done. He sets the cleansed ring aside and turns to Celebrimbor with eyes that hold depths the elf can barely fathom. In his cheerful, almost childlike voice, he speaks words that will haunt the master craftsman for the rest of his days. Pretty things, these baubles, but they sing such sad songs. The smith's heart shapes the metal more than his hammer ever could, young one. What songs have you been listening to? It's then that Celebrimbor fully understands the magnitude of his error. Sauron hasn't just been offering technical knowledge, he's been influencing the very spirit with which the rings were made. Every conversation, every shared moment over the forge, every seemingly innocent suggestion has been carefully calculated to ensure that the rings would serve the Dark Lord's purpose, no matter who wore them. The three elven rings, Vilya, Narya, and Nenya, were different because they were made in secret without Sauron's direct involvement. But even they carry echoes of the techniques he taught, the mindset he cultivated. They're purer than the others, but they're still part of the same system, still connected to the web of power that centers on the one ring that Sauron is even now preparing to forge. Tom sees all of this in an instant, sees the threads of fate spinning out from this moment. He could stop it, could prevent the forging of the Seven and the Nine, could warn the Elves about Anatar's true nature. But that's not his role. He exists outside the great struggles of the age, watching, understanding, but rarely interfering. His purpose isn't to prevent the darkness, but to remind the world that light still exists, that joy and freedom persist even in the deepest shadow. Instead, he does something far more subtle and far more powerful. He teaches Celebrimbor a new song, an ancient melody that predates even the music of the Ainur. It's a song of making without taking, of creating without controlling, of craft that serves beauty rather than power. The elf learns it instantly, his ancient mind recognizing truth when he hears it, even if he can't fully understand its implications. This song becomes Celebrimbor's secret weapon, his hidden rebellion against Sauron's influence. When he crafts the three rings in secret, he sings Tom's melody, infusing them with something the Dark Lord cannot touch or corrupt. It's why these rings alone retain their power after Sauron's fall, why they can heal and preserve rather than dominate and destroy. They carry within them an echo of Tom's song, a fragment of the world as it was meant to be. But there's more to this meeting than just the cleansing of one ring or the teaching of one song. Tom shows Celebrimbor something that changes how he views his entire craft. The greatest danger of the Rings of Power isn't their corruption by Sauron, it's the desire for power itself. Even with the purest intentions, the urge to control, to preserve, to hold on to what we love leads inevitably to domination. Tom demonstrates this by doing something impossible. He creates. Not with hammer and forge, not with careful planning and ancient techniques, but with pure joy. Flowers bloom at his feet, the air fills with the sound of distant music, and for a moment the forge itself seems to remember what it was like when the world was young and everything was possible. This isn't magic, as the elves understand it, bound by laws and limitations, shaped by will and knowledge. This is something deeper, the same force that spoke the world into existence, that shaped mountains and seas with nothing but song and joy. It's creation without possession, power without dominion, the thing that Sauron, for all his might, can never truly understand or replicate. Celebrimbor watches in wonder as Tom's casual act of creation makes all his careful craft seem small and constrained. The rings on his workbench, masterworks that represent centuries of learning and skill, pale beside the simple miracle of a flower blooming out of season, a butterfly made of light and laughter that dances through the air before dissolving into golden sparks. But Tom's greatest gift to Celebrimbor isn't the demonstration of power beyond power, it's the reminder of why creation matters in the first place. The elves make rings to preserve their realms, to hold back the tide of time and change that threatens everything they love. It's a noble goal born of genuine care, but it's still rooted in fear, in the desire to control rather than accept. Tom shows him a different way. Instead of trying to hold on to the past or control the future, he suggests embracing the present moment, finding joy in the act of creation itself rather than in what that creation might accomplish. It's a radical idea that challenges everything Celebrimbor believes about craft and purpose, but it plants a seed that will grow in unexpected ways. The meeting ends as quietly as it began. Tom picks up his walking stick, tips his feathered hat, and prepares to leave. But before he goes, he gives Celebrimbor one final gift, a small stone from the banks of the Withywindle, worn smooth by countless years of flowing water. It's nothing special, just a river rock, but when the elf holds it, he hears an echo of Tom's song, a reminder of the lesson he's learned. This stone becomes Celebrimbor's most precious possession, more valuable to him than all the rings he's created. When Sauron's true nature is finally revealed, when the Dark Lord comes to Eregion with fire and sword, Celebrimbor clutches this simple stone and finds in it the strength to resist. It's why he refuses to reveal the location of the three rings, even under torture, why he dies protecting secrets that could save Middle-earth. The influence of that meeting ripples outward in ways that reshape the entire War of the Ring. The three rings, infused with Tom's song, become the foundation of the elves' resistance to Sauron's power. Elrond's realm endures because Vilya carries within it an echo of joy that no shadow can fully extinguish. Galadriel's mirror shows truth because Nenya reflects the world as it truly is, not as its users wish it to be. And Gandalf, bearer of Narya, finds in the Ring of Fire not just power, but hope itself, the ability to kindle courage in the darkest hours. Even the other rings are affected by Tom's intervention, though more subtly. The 7 given to the Dwarf Lords retain enough independence to resist Sauron's complete control. The dwarves become greedy and wrathful under their influence, but they never become slaves as Sauron intended. Something in their making, some echo of Celebrimbor's enlightenment, gives them the strength to maintain their own will. The 9 rings given to men fall more completely under Sauron's power, transforming their bearers into the Nazgul. But even they carry within them a seed of what they could have been, a memory of creation without corruption that sometimes surfaces in unexpected moments. It's why the Witch King can be defeated by mortal courage, why the mouth of Sauron can be intimidated by Aragorn's kingly presence. They're not just servants of darkness, they're corrupted masterworks that remember, however dimly, what they once were. But perhaps the most important effect of Tom's meeting with Celebrimbor is what it reveals about the nature of power itself. The rings fail not because they're evil, but because they're based on a flawed understanding of what power should accomplish. They seek to preserve and control, to hold back, change, and decay, but in doing so they become part of the very force they're trying to resist. Tom's approach is radically different. He has power beyond anything the rings can grant, but he uses it not to control or preserve, but to simply exist in harmony with the world around him. His realm doesn't endure because he forces it to, but because it embodies the joy and freedom that make existence worthwhile in the first place. This is the lesson that Frodo finally learns at the end of his journey. The ring can't be used for good because the desire to use it at all is the corruption. The only way to defeat Sauron is to give up the power to defeat him, to choose vulnerability over control, trust over certainty. It's a lesson that goes back to that night in Eregion when Tom Bombadil showed the greatest craftsman of the age that true creation comes not from mastery, but from surrender. The meeting between Tom and Celebrimbor represents something unique in Tolkien's mythology. It's a moment when two different approaches to existence encounter each other, when the desire to preserve and protect meets the willingness to simply be. Neither approach is wrong, but only one leads to genuine freedom. Celebrimbor's tragedy isn't that he was corrupted by Sauron, it's that he was noble enough to want to protect the things he loved, but couldn't let go of the need to control how that protection worked. Tom's gift to him isn't immunity from corruption, but a glimpse of what lies beyond the need for protection at all. In the end, the story of Tom Bombadil and Celebrimbor is the story of Middle-earth itself. It's about the choice between holding on and letting go, between the safety of control and the terror and joy of freedom. The rings represent one path, beautiful, tragic, and ultimately doomed. Tom represents another, stranger and more difficult, but leading to a kind of immortality that doesn't depend on preserving anything at all. When the Fourth Age begins and the Elves sail west, their rings lose their power, not because Sauron is defeated, but because the age of preservation is ending. The world is changing, becoming something new, and only those who can embrace that change will find their place in it. Tom Bombadil remains because he never needed to hold on to anything in the first place. He is what he is, eternal, not because he resists change, but because he embodies something that transcends it entirely. The untold story of Tom Bombadil and Celebrimbor isn't just about a chance meeting between two beings of power. It's about the fundamental choice that defines every moment of existence. Do we try to control our circumstances, or do we find our freedom in accepting them? Do we create in order to possess, or do we create for the pure joy of creation itself? This is why Tom Bombadil matters in Tolkien's world, why his seemingly simple character carries such weight in the larger story. He represents the road not taken, the choice that few have the courage to make. In a world obsessed with power and its proper use, he alone chooses not to use power at all, and in doing so reveals what power actually is. The rings of power were created with the highest intentions, forged by the greatest craftsmen, infused with knowledge that came from the very foundation of the world. but they failed because they were based on fear, on the assumption that good things must be protected and controlled to survive. Tom's meeting with Celebrimbor suggests a different possibility, that the good we're trying to protect might be stronger than we think, might not need our protection at all. That's the true untold story of the Rings of Power. Not the tale of their forging or their finding, but the moment when their maker glimpsed what they could have been if he'd had the courage to let them be nothing more than expressions of joy. It's a story about the paths we don't take, the choices we can't make, and the strange figure in yellow boots who reminds us that another way is always possible,